The moment I stepped into the room, I knew something was wrong. They were all there, my aunt, my cousins, even my mother's cold second husband, sitting in a perfect circle like it was some kind of intervention. Two unfamiliar men in suits stood near the fireplace, briefcases open, pens ready. Amanda, my cousin, gave me a smile too sweet to be real. We just thought it'd be easier if we handled the estate together, she said. Then they handed me a document and a pen. I glanced around at their expectant faces, waiting for me to fold. But instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out an envelope, and laid it on the table like a royal flush. My grandfather wrote this before he died, I said, and I think it changes everything. The room fell silent, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one on the defensive. Growing up, I was always the quiet one. At family gatherings, while my cousins bragged about their grades or flaunted their latest designer bags, I'd be the girl helping clear the dishes or reading alone in the den. My mom used to call me Grandpa's shadow, not out of affection, but as if it were something to be ashamed of. Truth was, I adored him. Grandpa Henry Morgan wasn't just my grandfather, he was the only adult in my life who saw me, really saw me. After my father died and my mother remarried a man who cared more about wine than words, Grandpa's creaky old workshop became my sanctuary. While other kids went to ballet class or summer camp, I learned how to repair busted drawers and stain hardwood floors. He taught me the names of every tool, the difference between plywood grades, and most importantly, how to tell when someone was trying to take advantage of you. People show you who they are when money's in the room, he once told me, tapping his calloused fingers against a tin box filled with screws. Watch what they do, not what they say. At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. Now I know better. The rest of the family, of course, never came to the shop. They called it the garage like it was beneath them. They were too busy making social posts from luxury brunches or planning the next family vacation that I was never invited to. To them, Grandpa Henry was a relic useful only for his money and nostalgic stories, but to me, he was everything. That's why when the phone rang 2 weeks after his funeral, I didn't hesitate. The voice on the other end belonged to Darlene Brooks, his longtime lawyer and friend, Miss Eleanor Morgan, she asked. Her tone clipped yet kind. I'd like to schedule a private reading of your grandfather's will. He left instructions that it be done with you alone before anything is disclosed to the rest of the family. My heart stuttered. Just me. Yes, tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'll send the location to your email. And, Eleanor, bring a clear mind. There's more to this than numbers. Click. I sat for a long time after that, the silence in my tiny apartment buzzing louder than traffic. I wasn't sure what she meant, but I knew Grandpa never did anything without purpose. The next morning, I showed up early to the law firm, a tall building downtown, all polished marble and glass, the kind of place that made you feel small. But Darlene was waiting in the lobby, a gray blazer sharp against her dark skin, eyes both kind and unblinking. Inside the conference room, she handed me a thick envelope and took a seat across from me. Your grandfather left everything to you, she said, calmly. I blinked. Everything? She nodded. The house in Weston Hills, the Morgan hardware store on Mill Street, his investment portfolio, cash assets, all of it roughly valued at $3.2 million. I stared at her. I, I thought he would split it between Amanda, Uncle Rob, maybe even my mom. Darlene shook her head. He revised his will 6 months ago. I have the medical documents to confirm he was of sound mind, and he left you a letter with trembling hands. I opened the second envelope and read it silently. Ellie, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry for leaving you to deal with the others alone. But I want you to know you were always my favorite, not because of sentiment, but because you saw me as a person, not a bank account. I watched you grow into someone with integrity, empathy, and quiet strength. That's why I'm leaving everything to you. You'll be tested. They'll try to guilt you, trick you, bully you. But remember, you owe them nothing. I've given you what they'll never understand, a foundation. Build on it. My throat tightened. I pressed the letter to my chest. When I looked up, Darlene was watching me. There's more. she said softly. If they push you, if they try to manipulate you into signing anything, there's a secondary document. Sealed, with his handwriting. He said you'd know when to use it. I nodded, eyes already burning. I didn't know what kind of storm was coming, but for the first time in my life, I knew I wouldn't face it as the forgotten girl in the corner. I was the one holding the legacy now. The funeral had been exactly what I expected: ornate, overproduced, and utterly impersonal. My mother had insisted on renting a cathedral-sized venue because it's what Dad would have wanted, even though Grandpa Henry had always said he preferred something simple. She wore a black lace dress, 2 sizes too tight, and sobbed dramatically into a silk handkerchief, while Amanda clung to her like some scene out of a vintage melodrama. Everyone else, of course, was there in their Sunday best, not to grieve, but to be seen. I sat 3 rows from the front, not because I was late, but because someone had quietly moved the family seating cards after I arrived. I didn't fight it, I never did. While my mother gave a tearful eulogy about how much Grandpa loved the whole family, I kept my eyes on the casket. The oak was polished so smooth it glowed in the sunlight, and I wondered if anyone else realized that Grandpa had made it himself years ago. He had told me once, while sanding the lid. Better I build it while my hands still work, won't trust a stranger to close me in. I was the only one who knew that. I didn't say a word. After the service, the family gathered outside, under a white tent, with catered food and soft jazz playing from wireless speakers. Amanda was the first to corner me. "You look tired," she said sweetly, tucking her perfectly curled hair behind one ear. "You know, if you need help sorting out Grandpa's will, Uncle Rob has a wonderful estate advisor." "Thanks," I said quietly, "but I've already spoken to his lawyer." Amanda's smile froze. "You have." She called me, said Grandpa made arrangements. Her lips parted, just slightly. A flicker of calculation passed over her face before she masked it again. "Well, I suppose that makes sense." She said, "Grandpa always had a soft spot for you." Soft spot. Right. I walked away before she could probe deeper. As I passed the catering table, Uncle Rob was in mid-conversation with one of his golf buddies. I'm telling you, Henry was sitting on at least 2 million, not counting the store. He whispered, not realizing or not caring that I could hear him. "I'll bet Amanda gets the house, Carla'll get the lake property, and Eleanor maybe a car or some savings bonds, if she's lucky." I kept walking. By the end of the afternoon, I'd had 4 relatives ask if I needed support with anything Grandpa left behind. Every conversation was coded in fake concern and real curiosity. One even asked if Grandpa had any hidden collectibles, because he used to be into antiques. Right. No one mentioned that Grandpa had raised me for 10 years after my dad's accident. No one asked how I was doing. I guess that wasn't the kind of inheritance they were interested in. That night, I sat at the foot of my bed, reading Grandpa's letter for the 5th time. I ran my fingers over his signature, the sharp strokes, the final flourish. They were circling me like vultures already. He knew they would, and he'd left me armor. The next morning, I received a text from my mother. "Dinner at our place Friday, family only. Need to talk about next steps. Bring all papers from the lawyer." "Mom." "No, hi. No hope you're okay. Just an order disguised as family bonding." Then Amanda messaged me, "Can't wait to see you Friday. We should talk before dinner. Woman to woman." I didn't reply. I knew what this was. They didn't know I had already seen the will. They didn't know I had a private letter. And they definitely didn't know about the sealed envelope Darlene had placed in my hand with the words, "Use this only if they come after what's not theirs." Friday arrived with perfect sunshine that made everything feel wrong. I drove slowly to my mother's house, a modern white brick colonial in the suburbs that had never once felt like home. The driveway was packed with unfamiliar cars. When I stepped through the front door, the air felt off. Too quiet, too arranged, like a trap waiting to spring. "Eleanor," my mother said, arms outstretched in a hug that never quite landed. "We're so glad you came." I said nothing, just nodded. From the living room, I heard murmured voices, the rustle of papers, the clink of coffee cups. The fireplace crackled even though it was 70 degrees outside. And then I saw them, two men in sharp suits, seated comfortably, folders open on their laps. Amanda waved me over. Come in, cousin. We've been waiting for you. I paused in the hallway. I could already feel Grandpa's letter in my purse, pressing against my side like a steady heartbeat. Whatever they thought was about to happen, they were wrong. I stepped into the living room, and it hit me all at once. The sofas had been rearranged into a loose semicircle, like we were about to begin a staged discussion. Two polished wooden chairs faced inward, clearly placed there for me and someone else, probably Amanda. A low table in the middle held a neat stack of papers, a tray of untouched pastries, and two pens laid out side by side like surgical instruments. The suited men rose as I entered. This is Thomas Blake and Nolan Press, Amanda announced like she was hosting a charity gala. They're experts in estate consolidation. We brought them in to help simplify things. Simplify. I nodded slowly and sat down without being asked. Across from me, my mother gave me a tight smile. Carla, my stepmother, looked at the pastries like they might attack her. Uncle Rob leaned against the mantel, arms crossed, as if overseeing a hostile negotiation, and Amanda practically glowed. We're just trying to be proactive, she said sweetly. Grandpa's estate is big. It affects everyone. It only makes sense that we agree on how to divide it fairly. I kept my expression blank. Fairly well. Yes, she said, blinking innocently. Grandpa always believed in family unity. None of us want this to get complicated or, God forbid, ugly. At that moment, Nolan Price spoke up. We've reviewed the assets. With everyone's cooperation, we can easily create a shared trust. You'd still be a primary signatory, of course, but the trust would grant equal oversight to everyone in this room. I asked. Yes, he replied, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. I glanced around. Carla avoided my gaze. Uncle Rob gave me a firm nod, like we'd already agreed. Amanda smiled, lips pursed. You want me to sign over my inheritance? I said flatly. To a trust you'll all control. We want what's best for the family, my mother said, finally speaking. I looked at her, this woman who once told me I was a burden the moment I turned 18, who left me with Grandpa so she could go find herself in Costa Rica and never really came back. I didn't respond. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out the thick will envelope Darlene had given me, and laid it flat on the table. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Morgan, it's important to understand I have read the will, I said, cutting him off, and I'm the sole beneficiary. My grandfather left everything to me. Silence. Amanda recovered first. That must be a mistake. It's not, I replied. He updated the will 6 months ago. But why, you Uncle Rob asked, incredulous. Henry was always about family. Not me, I offered. He froze. Thomas cleared his throat. Even if you're the named beneficiary, there are legal benefits to shared trusts. Less tax liability. Less, I'm not signing anything today, I said firmly. Not without my lawyer present. Amanda's voice sharpened. We're just trying to help you. Ellie, I turned to her. No, you're trying to take what was never yours. That shut her up. Then, without a word, I slid the second envelope, the one Darlene had marked with a red seal, out of my purse and placed it next to the will. My grandfather anticipated this. I said, he wrote a letter. Personal. Sealed. Witnessed. It's not just legally binding, it's clear. I opened the envelope slowly, deliberately, like I was unveiling a secret weapon, and Eleanor, if they gather like vultures, and they will show them this, I left everything to you because you never once asked me for $1. You never acted entitled. You listened. You worked. And when I gave you small things, you built something with them. You are the one person I trust to honor what I've built. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying for their own benefit. You do not owe them fairness. You owe them nothing. Henry, when I finished reading, I looked up. Amanda's mouth was slightly open. Uncle Rob looked like he'd swallowed a stone. My mother had gone still. Carla was staring at her lap. Thomas and Nolan said nothing. I folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. If any of you want to challenge this, feel free, I said calmly. but be prepared to explain to a judge why you're trying to overturn the wishes of a man who was fully competent when he wrote this. Silence again. Dinner's over, I said. Standing. No one moved. I walked toward the door with the envelope in my hand and my back straight, and for the first time in my life, I felt taller than all of them. The next morning, the text messages began. First from Amanda. Let's not overreact. We're family. Emotions ran high. Let's talk. Then from my mother, you're being dramatic. He was old. He wasn't thinking clearly when he wrote that letter. And then Uncle Rob. This can all be solved with a little generosity. Ellie, don't make this into a battle. A battle that was exactly what they'd tried to start with lawyers, with manipulation, with guilt thinly disguised as family unity. But now that their ambush had failed, they wanted to reframe it like I was the aggressor. I didn't reply to any of them, but they weren't done. 2 days later, I came home to find Carla standing outside my apartment building. My stepmother, the woman who had once forgotten my birthday 3 years in a row. She wore a tight gray blazer, designer sunglasses perched on her head, and held a pastry box like a peace offering. It was awkward, almost theatrical. You don't return texts, she said, forcing a smile, so I thought I'd drop by. I didn't think we were on pastry terms, I said flatly, not unlocking the door. She laughed nervously. I figured we could have coffee. Talk. I mean, Henry was a complicated man, maybe too generous when he made that will. There was nothing complicated about it. I said, he trusted me, and he didn't trust the rest of you. Her eyes narrowed slightly. That's not fair. No. What's not fair is that all of you treated him like a bank until the day he died, then tried to corner me into signing away everything he left. Ellie, she said, voice dipping lower, you don't understand how these things work. Families don't run on legal documents, they run on give and take. You'll need support eventually. You might get married, have kids. Wouldn't it be better to share now so they'll support you later? There it was, the long game. If guilt didn't work, fear would. I said nothing. Think about it, she added, setting the box on the stoop. My offer stands. Then she left. I didn't touch the pastries. That night, I found myself unable to sleep. I reread the letter Grandpa had left me at least 6 times. Then I opened the sealed folder. Darlene had included with it a set of notarized documents, photos, and voice memos on a flash drive. It was a backup plan. Grandpa hadn't just left me words. He left me evidence. In the weeks leading up to his death, he'd hired someone to sit in on a dinner party at Amanda's house when I hadn't been invited to. The person wore a wire, and what they recorded was damning. She'll just sign, she's soft. If we push her together, she won't fight. She didn't even go to law school. She's just Eleanor, my name tossed around like a weak link, a placeholder, the assumption that I would buckle under pressure, like I always had when I was younger. They didn't realize I'd changed. That same night, I called Darlene. I think it's time we get ahead of this. I said, I want protections in place. Ironclad. She didn't ask questions, just said, meet me tomorrow. Bring everything. Over the next week, I worked quietly. I opened a private account and began the process of transferring assets into my name. I visited the hardware store Grandpa left me shuttered since his stroke and took the keys from the property manager. I met with an accountant, a security expert, and a nonprofit advisor, piece by piece. I started building the life I had never believed I was allowed to have. The family didn't stop. They just got smarter. Amanda sent me a long email titled, Let's Heal. Filled with self-help language and faux vulnerability, she told me she used to be jealous of my bond with Grandpa and wanted to start fresh. Uncle Rob invited me to lunch at the golf club, of course. When I didn't respond, he left a voicemail reminding me that legacies are better shared. Even my mother tried again, this time with tearful voicemails about memories and what Dad would have wanted. I ignored them all. Because with every visit, every message, every fake smile, one truth became clearer. They didn't want me in the family. They wanted the money, and they'd wear any mask necessary to get it. On Sunday morning, I got an email from Darlene's subject, Re-Protective Measures Finalized Eleanor. All trust transfers and financial safeguards are complete. Your inheritance is fully under your control. If they try anything else now, it's their risk, not yours. D. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I smiled. 3 days after Darlene finalized the trust, I received a formal looking envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just my name, typed in clean serif font, Miss Eleanor Morgan re Henry Morgan Estate. Consolidation discussion. Inside was an invitation thinly veiled as an informal estate planning follow-up meeting to be held at Amanda's house on Saturday afternoon. Nothing about it felt informal. It was written in legal language but delivered like a family brunch, the kind of thing meant to make you let your guard down while stepping into a trap. I could almost hear Amanda's voice in the phrasing, light refreshments will be provided. Bring any documentation necessary for collaborative planning. Collaborative, my ass. Still, I accepted. And I didn't tell them I'd be bringing someone. 2. Saturday arrived, cloaked in gray clouds. Amanda's house, immaculate and cold as always, sat like a country club in the suburbs, complete with stone lions flanking the front door. As I stepped inside, the smell of lemon polish and lavender candles made my skin crawl. Ellie Amanda greeted me at the door like a hostess greeting a VIP guest at a gala. You look amazing. I wore black jeans, a simple navy blazer, and my hair in a low bun, nothing flashy, but intentional. Clean, professional. I'm here for the meeting, I said flatly. Of course, right this way. She led me through the foyer, past a table of hors d'oeuvres no one had touched, into the living room now rearranged like a boardroom. 3 chairs faced a glass coffee table. On it sat a fresh stack of documents, a pen, a legal pad. 2 men were already seated, Thomas and Nolan again, the same advisors from last time, wearing identical navy suits, as if copied and pasted. Miss Morgan, Thomas said. Stand in. We appreciate you making the time, Nolan added, gesturing for me to sit. I did not. Let's skip the pleasantries. I said, what's this about? Amanda's tone changed, instantly slipping into something softer, lower. We thought perhaps our last conversation was too rushed. We wanted to revisit things with cooler heads. Cooler heads. She nodded. You have to admit, Ellie, Grandpa's decision, it caught us all off guard. We acted emotionally, but now that we've all had time to reflect, we just want to make sure everything's handled responsibly. She sat down across from me, crossing her legs behind her. Uncle Rob stood near the window, arms folded. My mother was off to the side, sipping from a wine glass, even though it wasn't yet noon. Thomas interjected, tapping the document. We've prepared a revised agreement, not a trust this time. Just a management structure so you're not overwhelmed with oversight. You'd retain full ownership, but we'd provide advisory access on significant decisions. Advisory access. I repeated, you mean a back door? Amanda's smile twitched. It's really just a safety net. For you. And for you, I said, eyes narrowing. I finally sat. Not to accept, but to observe. Nolan slid the papers toward me. This is a sample framework used in many legacy families. It's about stewardship. I flipped through the first few pages. It was elegant, well, legally sound, and completely designed to give them influence over my decisions, slowly eroding authority until I was just a figurehead over the very inheritance they tried to steal weeks ago. I looked up. Where's your copy of the will? Thomas blinked. Excuse me, if we're talking stewardship, let's read what Grandpa actually wrote. Amanda exhaled sharply. Eleanor, must we? Yes, I said, we must. I reached into my bag and pulled out a crisp copy of the official will, the one notarized and signed with witnesses' public record by now, but evidently inconvenient for this room. I read aloud, Henry Arthur Morgan, being of sound mind and body, hereby leave the entirety of my estate, real, financial, and liquid, to my granddaughter Eleanor Morgan, and to her alone. No portion shall be redistributed, renegotiated, or diluted by any advisory body, unless so directed by her and her alone. Amanda flushed. Nolan stiffened. Thomas lowered his gaze. I believe that settles the matter, I said. For a moment, no one moved. Then my mother spoke up. soft and sharp like a blade in silk. Why are you doing this to us? Eleanor, I turned slowly to her. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm doing something for myself for once. She took a step forward. You're letting this money get in your head. We're your family. You're right. I said, you are my family, which is why it's so disturbing that you all tried to steal from me together. Amanda stood. You're being dramatic again. No, I'm being clear. And then, very calmly, I pulled out a small voice recorder and placed it on the glass table. Amanda paled. You remember this device, don't you? I said, I found it in Grandpa's safe. He recorded your dinner back in May, the one where you all discussed how to convince me to hand over the estate. My mother's wine glass shook slightly. Uncle Rob stiffened. I pressed play. She's always been a pushover. We'll talk her into it. It's what Henry would have wanted. She just doesn't know it yet. Their voices echoed off the walls like ghosts. When the clip ended, I turned off the recorder and stood. This meeting is over, I said. And so is your illusion of control. I walked out, the weight of the entire room collapsing behind me. I didn't make it to the end of Amanda's driveway before the first person followed me. It was my mother, Eleanor. Wait, she called out, heels clicking hastily across the pavement. We need to talk. I stopped by my car, key in hand but engine off. She looked like she hadn't rehearsed this part. That made two of us. You embarrassed everyone back there, she said, arms folded tightly over her chest. They embarrassed themselves. I replied flatly. Her tone dropped into something more brittle. Your grandfather would be ashamed of how you're handling this. I turned to face her. You mean how I refused to give up everything he left me without a fight? That money was supposed to stay in the family. It is staying in the family, I said. I'm his family. The only one who stayed, the only one who helped him when he got sick, the only one who didn't ask him for money every holiday. Her mouth opened, then closed, and for the first time in years she had no comeback, but that wasn't the end. The following Monday, I received a letter via courier again, no return address. This time it wasn't an invitation. It was a formal family resolution agreement, complete with new signatures at the bottom Amanda, Uncle Rob, and my mother. They were trying to strong-arm me, legally. The document proposed that I voluntarily distribute a portion of the estate in exchange for them agreeing not to contest the will, dressed up as compromise, but make no mistake it was a threat. Contest the will or give them a piece voluntarily. I called Darlene that afternoon. They're escalating. I said, I expected as much. She replied, let me handle it. We're going to stop playing defense. 2 days later, Amanda showed up in person. She didn't bother knocking. She waited until I opened the door to take out the trash, then stepped into my doorway like she still had the right. I'm not here to argue, she began, holding her hands up, just to talk. I'm not interested. Please, she said. 2 minutes, that's all I'm asking. I should have shut the door, but some part of me, the part that had spent years trying to be polite, even when it hurt, stepped aside and let her speak. I know things got out of hand, Amanda said softly, taking a seat at the edge of the couch. But think about this from our side. We've always lived with the assumption that Grandpa's estate would be shared, because you assumed I'd never stand up for myself. I said, she didn't deny it. I get it. She went on, you feel like this is finally your time. But this money, it's going to isolate you. You'll be alone. I folded my arms, better alone with my dignity than surrounded by people who tried to rob me. She blinked, recovering. Look, she said, pulling out a sleek manila folder. If it's about control, we can restructure the agreement. You still get majority stake. We just want access to the investment accounts. You'd be the face, we'd be the managers. It was so transparent I almost laughed. You want to control the parts that grow. It's business, she said coolly. No hard feelings. No feelings at all. Apparently, that was when I finally said what I hadn't let myself say until now. You don't care that Grandpa died. You care that he took the power away from you when he gave everything to me. Amanda didn't blink. That letter. She said, you think that letter proves something? It proves everything. I replied, and with that, I handed her the door. Later that night, I found myself pacing in the hallway of my apartment, Luna, my golden retriever, watched me with quiet concern, tail thumping gently on the floor. I crouched next to her, running my fingers through her fur. I don't want to be this person, I whispered, the one who's always looking over her shoulder, who has to second guess every smile from her own family. She licked my hand, as if to say, "You already are, but you're stronger now." I sat down and picked up my phone. My text to Darlene was short. I want to go public. If they try anything else, I want the world to know what they did. The next morning, Darlene called. "We'll do it your way," she said. "But first we make it legally impossible for them to win." Within 48 hours, she had filed a notice of legal representation across all potential estate-related disputes. If anyone tried to contest the will, they'd be facing her in court, and based on her reputation, no one would win. That night, I slept for the first time in weeks without waking up from a nightmare of being cornered, because for the first time, I was no longer reacting to their pressure. I was preparing my next move. The ambush came on a Sunday. I should have known. There had been too much silence. After weeks of legal positioning, veiled threats, and manipulative overtures disguised as family meetings, they finally tried to hit me where they thought I was weakest. Surprise. It started with a phone call from my cousin Amanda, of course, on speakerphone with fake cheeriness radiating through the line. "Hey, Ellie, we're doing a casual brunch at Uncle Rob's place today. You should stop by. Nothing formal, just mimosas and closure, closure." The word stuck like a fishbone in my throat. I almost said no, but something in her tone too measured, too sweet sent the hair on my arms standing up. "Sure," I said. "I'll be there." I arrived 20 minutes early, and that's when I saw the cars. Three I didn't recognize, sleek, expensive, rented, parked beside Uncle Rob's beat-up Ford truck. When I knocked, the door opened almost too quickly. Amanda greeted me with that brittle smile I'd come to associate with danger. "We're in the back patio," she said lightly. "We thought it'd be more relaxed." She led me through the hallway, passing trays of untouched pastries and neatly folded linen napkins. It looked more like a staged settlement than a family brunch. As we stepped onto the patio, I saw them, the same two lawyers from the previous meeting, and a third man, older, who introduced himself as neutral counsel, a supposed mediator. I didn't sit. "Didn't we already do this?" I said. Uncle Rob cleared his throat. "We thought it would help to have a professional voice this time, someone who could clarify the options. No pressure. Options." Amanda gestured to a small table with more documents. "This is the final version," she said, in that polished tone she always used when she thought she was being clever. "No restructuring, no long-term trust, just a percentage, one-time division, clean, fair." I didn't move. "What percentage? 30? She said. "You keep 70. We split the rest. It's generous." "Generous," I repeated. "For who?" "The family," she said, eyes sharpening. "And don't act like this is about money. Ellie, you're not even using it. You're sitting on a warehouse, a hardware store you haven't reopened, and cash, that's doing nothing." I smiled coldly. "And that's your concern. Why?" She flinched just for a second. Then my mother spoke from the far end of the patio. "You don't have to do this alone," she said gently. "We could all be part of something. Grandpa's legacy, his spirit." I stared at her. "You mean the legacy you only remembered after the bank account got involved?" That's when Uncle Rob stood up. His voice shifted, louder, trying to reclaim control. "You're being difficult. Eleanor, no one's threatening you. We're offering balance. And if you won't sign, we'll have no choice but to bring up competency issues." There it was, the real weapon. They would challenge Grandpa's mental state when he wrote the will. "Are you threatening to invalidate a legal document with a false mental health claim?" I asked calmly. "It's not false," Amanda snapped. "He was on heart medication. He was 82, and he passed every cognitive test his doctors gave him." I replied. I stepped forward, pulled a folded letter from my bag, and laid it on the table. It was the handwritten note Grandpa had left me, the original. "He saw this coming," I said, my voice low but steady. "Every move, every whisper behind closed doors, every plan to circle around me like wolves." No one spoke. I opened the envelope slowly. with the kind of ceremony usually reserved for courtroom evidence. I read if they gather again, remember this, Ellie. They never knew how to build, only how to divide. That's why I chose you. I looked up at Amanda. You want a legacy. Start your own. Uncle Rob looked like he was about to explode. Then I pulled out the second document, the one they didn't know I had. The one Darlene helped me prepare, a formal cease and desist order. This, I said, tapping the page, bars any further attempts to interfere with the estate. If any of you contact me again regarding this matter or attempt legal coercion, I will pursue damages. Amanda scoffed. You wouldn't dare. I already filed it. I said, a copy is with the county clerk, another with Darlene. This brunch was your last shot. The third lawyer, the neutral one, cleared his throat. Legally speaking, he said awkwardly, Miss Morgan is within her rights. Any continued pursuit could be seen as harassment. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't icy tension. It was resignation. I turned to Amanda. I brought a letter, I said, and it's the only thing that needs to be said. Then I left. I didn't look back. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment beside Luna, reading Grandpa's letter again under the soft light of the desk lamp. They never knew how to build. I whispered it aloud. But I would. I was done defending. Now, I would begin creating. By Monday morning, the silence was almost eerie. No calls, no emails, no unexpected visitors. It was like they all evaporated overnight, leaving only the echo of what they tried to take. But I knew better. People like Amanda didn't give up. They recalculated. That's why when Darlene's number flashed on my screen at 9:14 a.m., I already knew what she was calling about. They submitted an initial petition, she said without preamble. Filed quietly this morning. It's not a full contest, but a motion to inquire questioning the legitimacy of the letter your grandfather left you. They're trying to find any opening. I closed my eyes. They want to claim he wasn't of sound mind exactly. We anticipated this. The medical records are already in my possession. Cognitive assessments, statements from his physician, even a dated video interview. You're covered. I exhaled slowly. So what now? We shut it down before it grows teeth, and we file your response publicly. That word made me pause. Publicly, Darlene's voice was calm but firm. It's time to take the story away from them. Later that day, I sat in the lawyer's office with a laptop in front of me and my grandfather's will, letter, and medical statements on the desk beside me. Darlene had drafted a statement. I added my voice. My name is Eleanor Morgan. I am the sole beneficiary of Henry Morgan's estate, as confirmed by his notarized and witnessed will, signed while under full cognitive clarity. Over the last several weeks, members of my extended family have attempted to coerce, manipulate, and pressure me into relinquishing this inheritance, despite knowing full well that it was never theirs to claim. This inheritance was not about money, it was about trust. My grandfather chose me not because of favoritism, but because he saw who truly valued what he built. I will not surrender that legacy to those who only remembered him when there was something to gain. We submitted it through public legal records and distributed it to a few community-focused outlets. I didn't expect it to make headlines, but I wanted a record because when the world watches, predators shrink. 2 days later, Amanda texted me, so now you're making this public. Wow, thought you were better than that. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed the message and handed it to Darlene. Add this to the binder, I said that weekend. I returned to the hardware store Grandpa had left me. It had sat dormant for almost 3 years, just like he left it. Dusty shelves, faded signage, tools still hanging on the pegboards like loyal soldiers waiting for orders. But beneath the grime, the bones were strong. Like Grandpa always said, you build something right the first time. It remembers. I stood in the center of the shop and whispered aloud, this is where we begin. For the next month, I poured everything into that store. I hired a contractor to restore the structure, but kept the original layout. I painted the walls the same soft gray Grandpa used in the back office, and I made one major change. The front showroom would become a learning space. With Darlene's help, I legally transformed the hardware store into a nonprofit community workshop. the Henry Morgan Vocational Initiative, dedicated to teaching trades to women seeking independence. The plan was simple: free courses in carpentry, basic electrical, plumbing, and mechanical repair. Workshops taught by licensed female contractors and engineers, a tool library where women could borrow equipment for their own projects, small grant programs to help those escaping financially manipulative relationships. It wasn't about revenge, it was about using what they tried to steal to empower others. Word spread faster than I expected. By the time we hung the new sign above the door, we had over 60 inquiries from shelters, career centers, and social workers. One of our first students was a woman named Kendra. She had 2 children, no formal degree, and had just left an emotionally abusive marriage where her husband controlled every dollar. "I don't know if I'm good with tools," she admitted nervously on her first day. "But I'm really tired of asking for permission to live." I smiled. "That's the only skill you need right now." By the end of the month, she could rewire a light fixture better than I could. Meanwhile, Amanda and Uncle Rob quietly withdrew their petition. Darlene sent me the confirmation with a note. Victory isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just permanent. They didn't apologize. They didn't acknowledge anything. But I didn't need them to, because I had the thing they never could take: clarity. I framed Grandpa's letter and mounted it behind the front desk, just below a photo of him in his favorite denim apron, holding a hammer and half a smile. Underneath the photo, I added a plaque: "They never knew how to build, but I do." Fall came early that year, bringing cool mornings and golden leaves drifting across the sidewalk in front of the newly opened Henry Morgan Vocational Initiative. By then, we were offering 4 weekly classes, and our evening workshops were booked solid through November, every day. I watched women walk through the door with uncertainty and walk out taller wielding drills, tape measures, and newfound confidence. But just as life began to stabilize, the past once again came knocking. It started with a letter, a thick, certified envelope addressed to my attorney, marked Re Eleanor Morgan, v. Amanda Cartwright, et al. The return address was a law firm I didn't recognize. Darlene called me before I had time to panic. "Before you worry, it's not a new lawsuit," she said, "but it's interesting. Amanda's legal team just sent a settlement proposal." "A settlement?" I asked, stunned. "They're trying again, no," Darlene said with a wry laugh. "They're offering to drop all remaining claims and sign a non-disclosure agreement. If you agree not to pursue damages." I blinked. "They're scared." "Very," she said. "That cease and desist, your statement, the failed legal inquiry. They know if this goes to court, they lose. And worse, they'll be exposed." I paused. "Do we pursue them?" Darlene was quiet for a beat. Then, "That's your call." I spent that night walking through the hardware store after closing, the scent of sawdust still clinging to the air. I stood in front of Grandpa's portrait, reading his words again: "They never knew how to build." I thought about how Amanda had tried to twist everything he left behind, how my mother stood by while they undermined me, how Uncle Rob had weaponized the word family, and they'd plotted behind my back and smiled to my face. They'd tried to use guilt, fear, and law to extract what they had no right to claim. I could go after them now. I had the proof, the legal standing, the motive. But as I looked around at the workshop benches, at the pegboards filled with tools, at the laminated name badges on our sign-in wall, I realized something I already won. They wanted money. I built a legacy. The next morning, I asked Arlene to draft a response. "My client declines settlement. No damages will be pursued at this time. No agreements will be signed. No more contact is welcome. This chapter is closed." Word spread through the family faster than wildfire. Within 24 hours, Amanda's Instagram went private. Uncle Rob canceled a speaking engagement at the Chamber of Commerce. My mother, according to a cousin, told friends she was stepping away from family matters. Not one of them reached out again, but just to be safe, I had Darlene send a follow-up letter to each one if they made any attempt, direct or indirect, to contact me again regarding the estate. Legal action would follow without hesitation. I meant every word. That weekend, we held our first community build day at the initiative. We partnered with local shelters to help refurbish transitional housing. 20 women showed up with tool belts, gloves, and steel determination. I watched them lay tile, repair drywall, patch old windows, and install new door locks with absolute focus. Among them was Kendra, now one of our strongest volunteers. At lunch, she walked over, wiping paint from her cheeks. You know, she said, before this place, I thought I was only good at surviving. Now, I think I might be good at building something. I smiled. You are. She looked at me for a moment and said softly, You know, you changed everything for us, right? The words hit harder than I expected because they were the opposite of everything I'd been told growing up. I was always too quiet, too soft, too hesitant. The family thought I was the girl who would never stand up, never say no, never fight back. But they were wrong. I wasn't soft. I was solid and like steel, like oak, like every beam in this place. That night, I walked through the empty store one last time before locking up. The old floorboards creaked just like they had when I was 10, trailing behind Grandpa's heavy boots. I imagined him walking beside me, inspecting the walls, nodding with approval. He had left me more than an inheritance. He'd left me a blueprint, and I was finally living it. Winter arrived gently that year, not with the harsh, bitter cold I was used to, but with soft snow that blanketed the city in quiet. At the workshop, we added space heaters and thermal work gloves to our supplies. A local contractor donated insulation, another sent lumber. Word about what we were doing had spread farther than I imagined community papers, even a radio interview, but the attention never mattered to me. What mattered were the women who showed up, the ones who once whispered during introductions, but now laughed over power saws, the ones who built chairs with their own hands and sat taller in them, the ones who no longer apologized for asking questions. They reminded me of myself before I knew how to say no, before I realized strength didn't mean loudness, and before I learned that quiet people still carry fire. 6 months after Amanda's final legal threat fizzled into silence, I received a letter. Not a lawsuit, not a manipulation, a real letter on paper, in cursive. It was from my grandfather's old neighbor, Mrs. Callahan. She wrote to tell me that Henry used to sit on his porch in the evening, sipping tea and speaking about his Ellie with pride. He told me he didn't worry about his legacy. She wrote, he said, She'll know what to do with it. She'll make it matter. I cried reading that, not the desperate sobs from those early days, not the frustrated tears of injustice, but the kind that rise up when something inside you finally releases. He had trusted me, even before I believed I was worth trusting. The following week, we held a ceremony at the initiative, quiet and small, no cameras, no press, just 30 women who had finished their certification programs in electrical repair, carpentry, or home safety. One by one, they walked to the front, received their certificate, and shared what they'd built since joining. One had fixed a roof that had leaked for 3 winters. One had installed security cameras outside her apartment building after her ex refused to return the key. One had started her own small business repairing cabinets. And Kendra, who once stood at the back of the room afraid to touch a drill, was now leading beginners' classes. She held her certificate with both hands, eyes shimmering. My daughter asked me yesterday if girls can fix houses. She said, I told her, Baby, girls can build the whole world if we want to. Applause erupted. I stood at the back of the room, unseen, heart full. This was what Grandpa meant. The very next morning, I visited the cemetery for the first time since the funeral. I brought a thermos of tea, 2 cups, and a folding chair. His headstone was simple. Henry Morgan, 1936-2023 builder, father, grandfather, teacher. I sat in the quiet, watching frost settle on the grass, steam rising from the cup in my hands. I did it, Grandpa, I whispered. They tried everything, guilt, pressure, law, but they couldn't take what you gave me. Not the money, the belief, the blueprint. I pulled a folded sheet of paper from my coat, a printout of the plaque we had installed above the main entrance of the initiative. It read, The Henry Morgan Vocational Initiative. It's not about what you leave behind. It's about what you teach them to build. I laid it beside a stone, just for a moment. Then I sat quietly, sipping tea, feeling the wind settle around me like an old blanket. Later that afternoon, I returned home. A package was waiting on the doorstep, no return label. Inside a box of expensive chocolates, a generic holiday card, and a note signed in neat, feminine script. No hard feelings, hope you're well. Amanda, I stared at it for maybe half a second. The old part of me, the one that hated confrontation, that wanted to keep peace at any cost, considered responding. But then I remembered her voice on that recording. She'll just sign, she's soft. I dropped the box in the trash without another thought. Peace doesn't mean silence, and forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. That night, I closed the shop alone. I turned off the lights, listened to the hum of the heating system, the click of metal against pegboard as the tools settled for the night. I glanced up one last time at the framed letter from Grandpa and the photo beside it, his hands calloused, his eyes kind. In the quiet, I finally whispered the words I had waited my whole life to say. I know who I am now, and for the first time, I truly believed it.